Good morning, everybody. Ed's back in the back, just grabbing a coffee. Anybody wants coffee? There's coffee back there, please. So if you feel free. Good morning. We're gonna try to get started here. Ed. There he is. Okay.
Well, the best thing about this, we're getting better food today than we get at regular meetings.
You guys really got to sit next to each other.
All right, so Steve, you want to get started, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know we have an agenda here. I know Ed has some things he wants to talk about. You have some things you want to talk about, Steve. How do you think the best way to proceed with this is, guys?
Well, basically, let's do what we want to do. I mean,
Okay.
What do we want to talk about?
What? Sure. So what we want to do is talk about the scope of what actually our responsibility is, right? So I think if I can be clear, is our responsibility is to analyze the current system that's been presented, figure out if that's the best solution for the community from an economic standpoint, and does it resolve our issues? We know we have the 4 parameters that we discussed, Steve, several times. Ed, we've discussed the 4 parameters. Obviously, the 4 parameters are affecting the entire calculation. We've discussed different alternative methods. One has been to go from medium high to medium low. Excuse me if I'm using the wrong terminology.
Medium, medium low.
Yeah. So
or neither intermediate high, intermediate low.
Yeah. Okay. So the recommendation is now by the state is to basically use the intermediate low, correct?
Wait a second. The intermediate low, or the low, is that what you're saying?
No, well, there's a number of curves, but the NOAA curves generally are NOAA intermediate high, which is the one that we've done the current calculations on. There's NOAA intermediate and there's NOAA intermediate low. Those are the 3 that I think we should consider. I think what I know I shared it with Councilmember Bracken. I'm not sure if I shared it with you. The state has directed state agencies. They haven't gone further, but by implication, this may mean that it would have an impact on their interest or even their willingness to fund projects that go above NOAA intermediate. So they have said design between NOAA intermediate low and NOAA intermediate. There is an organization called the Florida Flood Hub. I wouldn't say it's exactly like the Southeast Regional Climate Compact, but similar, that looks over the entire state. They've done the calculations and they said they feel comfortable, and this is important, at the NOAA intermediate low that has a 5% confidence interval.
What?
5% confidence interval. Not good. NOAA intermediate, 82%. Out to 2060. Or 2070, I'm not sure exactly which one, but somewhere around there. So just wanted to share that information with you. No comments beyond it, but I just want to share that went into state statute as of 1 July last year. Again, directing state agencies, not directing other organizations across the state.
I think the first thing we should talk about is what year are we looking at? Are we looking at 260, 50, or 40? Are we being realistic, or does it make any sense to look at 2060 that we've been doing up until now? The fact of the matter is the village will change. If you read ACOM stuff, they talk about the village being built out. Well, it's not built out because, number one, we have all the Mackle houses which will disappear in the next 25 years. They're going at the rate they should be going before 2050. At that point in time, those houses, assuming we don't change our requirements, right now we're talking about BFE +1, which is 11 feet. Subtract 2.5 feet from that, so it's 8.5 feet for the ground. So if 8.5 feet for the ground, then obviously the absorption area, assuming we believe there's any absorption, is much greater since the distance between the groundwater and that'll happen. The other thing is they also say about build out and looking at the LIDAR and everything else. Once FEMA came into being, we have basically a BFE of 9 and 10. So 9 and 10, our building code calls for 2.5, no more than 2.5 feet below that. So if you look at those numbers, you can see that there is which will make a tremendous difference, assuming that affects us the percolation. Okay, and then I know you keep saying, why do I bring up percolation? Because that affects the total amount of water we're going to have to pump out of the streets eventually. Yeah. So I think we're being reasonable. I know our first plan, which we got 10 years ago from EAC, was 2030. Fine, we'll agree that 2030 is too close of a horizon, but 2040 to 2050, if you want to be conservative, you can say 2050. Basically, every mackerel should be going there, or pretty damn much every mackerel should be going by that point in time. Well, by economics. I mean, forget about the sea level rise or anything else. Just a question of economics.
Great.
When the houses get more expensive and the land becomes that much more valuable, the house has a negative impact. Where a vacant lot, even today, is worth more than a mackerel house because it's the cost of demolition. So once you buy, because no one's going to buy, or I shouldn't say no one. There's always the exception. Very few people are going to spend $2.5 million to buy a 1,500 square foot house that's
Below flood grade.
75 years old that gets flooded or whatever. And really, it's just not modern. So I think that the first thing we should try and do is say 2050 or 2040, but forget about 2060.
I don't disagree.
Because if ACOM is correct and their 30-inch level or 27 inches is correct, the streets are going to be flooded. The pumps will be working full time, or we have to raise the streets, which I think we would. Plus, we have to raise all the inlets and repave the streets again. So
we also know that technology may
change.
some radical change, and this may not even be a problem.
So I think we really shouldn't even think about 2060. I mean, they've done 2060. We should look at 2015, 2040. I think the other thing, which made everybody aware of what's happening, is when all of a sudden we got this price and say, hey, 80 million, 100 million. If you remember what Fernando said, that could be double. But so we want to cut it back.
Let me make it clear. So the stormwater cost is 65 million.
Sorry.
The stormwater system cost is 65 million. I want to make sure.
65,
The other ones are the additional.
Well, 65 million to 35 million. So it hasn't totally doubled since the time they told us what it would be.
There's a lot of reasons why it
Well,
doubled. Let's just use 65 as the current estimate.
Doesn't it bother you at all, Steve, when they tell you, gave you a price of 35 million, 34 million, 700,000 or 800,000 originally for the 2-inch system? And when the pump station alone is 22 million, don't you think that maybe we've got just as, how do I say it? Nicely, I can't say things, but try and say it nicely.
It's a simple thing, Ed.
We
The
got
cost
played.
estimate right now is
We just
$65
got
million.
played little by little by little to
Gentlemen,
where we are
this is
today.
not bringing a lot of value.
Well, no, forget that. But my point is, so now the question is, how do we get the price down to make it reasonable? I think that's one of the major reasons we're here, is because, hey, this is wild. We didn't expect these kind of numbers. So how do we do it to make sense, to take care of it? This is zone one. And I think that is really one of our responsibilities here to get back. Once we get back to council with it, they're going to decide what they want to do.
Great.
What we can do is
I
recommend.
don't think there's any argument that we think it's too expensive.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
let's focus on trying to get the numbers down to what we believe is a reasonable number. I agree. 2040, 2045, 2050. We could run the 3 different scenarios and get the 3 different numbers. That's not really a big deal.
I also doubt that anybody, I shouldn't say that, maybe somebody in the council understood when we were spoon fed 7 inches is a good system. Actually, it was 8.5, reduced it to 7 inches in 24 hours. That the chance of that happening, assuming again from the paper we got from ACOM, which said the 10% chance in any given year.
For the benefit of everybody, we need to talk about what the parameter you're talking about is rain intensity, correct?
Yeah, I'm talking.
So for the people in the group who may
Okay.
not, we
But
talk
it's that
talk about
not only
rain
intensity, it's intensity and the total amount, because the intensity is very important, but it's also the total amount of rain. So basically, yes, that's what I'm talking about. And
So let's make sure we all get the parameters. So we got the timeline that we're worried about.
Yeah.
We've got the sea level rise curve that we're concerned about. And we got the rain intensity situation. And then we have the percolation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have those 4 parameters.
right,
So we can take those 4 parameters, we can stick them into to ACOM's model or a third party and get different information or the amount of, Steve, I always get this terminology wrong. I'm looking at the amount of fluid, amount of water that we have to move. We call it
It's
something else.
discharge requirement.
Yeah, just
So let me go back and I just want to, so when
I
you
just
said
want to make
rain
sure we get the 4 parameters.
Yeah, so
everybody
when you
understands.
said rain
let me
intensity, I
continue
want-
before you go to Steve. What I'm bringing up is that, do we realize that what we have today
is way over.
is that we're shooting for something which will happen either according to 65% chance of happening once in 10 years, according to, I think you said Tom Vacom, it's twice in 10 years. And if you look at the simple thing, which Mr. De La Cruz said to me, he said, well, that really comes down to one time or two times in 3,652 days. And when you look at that, it comes out to 2.7
Well, look,
I mean,
but-
so what any you look at, it's pie in the sky.
No one here other than you just showed me that math, okay? Knows what we're talking about. So we need to make sure that.
You and I know what we're
I
talking
know,
about.
but we need to make sure that we're.
They know what we're talking about.
Councilmember London, we do have a graph that shows that. And so what'll happen is twice in 10 years, it will hit the peak.
Mhm.
However, that peak
Yeah.
is over the curve of capacity more than 2 times. If you're following, you have to look at the curve to see it. So if you're imagining the peak rainfall comes at this, which is the 24-hour storm. The capacity is a curve that's down here.
Yep.
So therefore, it goes over that curve
Yep.
more than twice. The 24-hour storm only occurs 2 times in 10 years. So there's more to it.
Yeah,
And we do have a graph.
I'm
that
also
shows it to
looking
you.
at what they sent us from ACOM or Black and Beach, one of the two.
Yep.
I think he said it was ACOM, that this should occur once in a 10% chance of occurring in any given year. And
That's
that,
generally what
and
a
that
10-year
comes
storm
out
is,
to
yes.
using those numbers, it comes out to 65% chance of one time occurring in 10 years.
No, look, look, I don't want to make this an argument because it's not intended to be an argument. The reason why they use this information, because this is standard information that's identified in South Florida Water Management District. And so when you design a storm, you have to use some sort of parameters. You just can't make
Fine,
them
but
up.
we should have known at that point in time.
But there's also a 5-year storm if we choose, and we can.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to lay out
Oh, I
all of these
understand that.
parameters that the council member is saying. If we choose to use a 5-year storm, we can, and that will adjust the
All I'm
number of times
saying
it
is
happens.
we were never told when we agreed to this 7-inch thing that it could happen, the occurrence was the probability was so low.
I will disagree because we did this for 2 years, but we're not there. We're not going backwards. We're here today.
We're not gonna do.
We're not gonna rehash it.
Yes,
Just,
let's not do
We're here
history. Let's
today.
try to go forward.
yeah, I agree.
We're here today.
Right. So that's where our goals are to go forward. All right. So yeah, I agree with you that calculation is definitely showing that the opportunity for that to occur is extremely small. Okay. So I think we can set that aside.
Excuse me. Now, if the cost of doing that was extremely small,
No, then
we wouldn't care.
Then we wouldn't care. Exactly.
But it's not small.
It's not.
Tremendous.
It shows a large greater percentage of water than we potentially would.
Councilmember Bracken, do you mind if I just add something?
Please,
You and
yes.
I spoke. So, and I think this adds into what we're saying right here. So generally speaking, a level of service is its depth, duration, and location. And we've used that ever since we've begun this whole process in defining it. I think where you're going, Councilmember London, is maybe we need to consider frequency of event as part of our level of service. And what are we willing to accept that depth, duration, and location? How often are we willing to accept it?
That is exactly correct. That's called a cost-benefit relationship. How much are we willing to pay to get that thing?
No, I'm not talking about money yet. I'm talking
Well,
about
no,
how
but
much is the
excuse me.
community willing to accept that
No,
depth
but it
of water?
comes down to money. What will people
No, it will.
accept?
Yeah,
They don't
it'll
accept
flow through.
$125 million for something that's going to happen once in 10 years. But maybe the 125 million, if it happened once a week, yeah, that would be a bargain.
Well, I agree. What I'm
So
saying
all I'm
is
saying
maybe
is
we
a
need.
cost-benefit relationship. So it's a frequency of something happening as well as the cost and see what it happens to prevent it from happening or to
Agreed.
live with it.
I agree. So what I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what I'm saying is maybe we want to consider a level of service that adds that additional factor in.
Well, no, maybe we're saying the same thing, but differently. What I'm saying to you is that we can determine level of service, but what we should do, in my opinion, is first determine what the frequency of the rain is, how much rain is going to come down based on the 30 years ahead of time or 32 years they used. Find out how much rain will be absorbed based on the 2040 or 2050 on the low or the intermediate, whatever we're talking about. Once we have that, we'll have a capacity amount of rain. Then we also have an existing system. And the question is, do we add to the existing system or do we do what you're proposing or they're proposing, rip out and start everything from scratch? Now, that becomes a cost factor. And the cost factor is how many often will occur, how much will one thing cost versus the other. what are you getting for your buck? What kind of bang you getting for your buck? That's what we're really talking about. And we want to get a reasonable bang for our buck. We want to say, hey, this makes sense. And we can tell people with a straight face, yes, we're going to spend X amount of millions of dollars and we're doing this because this will take care of it 98% of the time, 90% of the time, whatever it'll be most of the time to give you this level of service. But we can't do that until we have those other parameters.
So we got, I think the primary goal today would be to agree on the parameters.
Yes.
Okay. And the different parameters that we want to run the model.
Mhm.
Okay. And then decide how many different vendors we want to use
Okay.
to verify those things, right? So I think we can limit that
Okay.
scope for today. That would be really useful.
Good. Okay. Well, I would suggest the following.
Pardon me?
I would suggest the following. I'm agreeing with you. I'd be happy to get one vendor other than Black and Beach or ACOM, because obviously they're biased. I mean, naturally. I mean, so basically that vendor would go ahead and calculate the probability.
Can we just agree on all?
Yeah.
We talked about the goals of the time.
Mhm.
We talked about the rain intensity.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about the sea level rise.
Yeah.
Ultimately is going to produce.
So what I'm saying is based on 2040 and 2050,
Yep.
start at 3 inches up to 7 inches by half-inch increments.
You talk about 3 inches of rain.
Yeah, 3 inch up to 7 inches, half-inch increments. 2040, 2050. Use what you said, the intermediate and the low, whatever the two things are, and come up with that. And the next thing, of course, is based on the absorption. Based on that, what is the absorption under the various conditions? 2040 and 2050.
Well, those factors you just talked about will give us the absorption.
Well,
So that's a
I'm saying-
byproduct of those.
Fine, but I'm saying that's what.
But I think the other fourth one is
That's
the
what-
contributing areas is doing.
What?
Contributing area.
The contributing areas.
Okay.
So
Is it 100 feet, 75 feet, 50 feet,
Yeah,
25 feet?
those are the
The absorption would can give a good idea of the contributing area, because obviously the more absorbed, the less is going to be contributed.
Of course, but if we take into consideration the contributing area, because right now we're designing to 100 feet from the crown of the road.
Yeah.
But from the edge of road, not crown of road, excuse me. So if we drop that to 50,
Edge right away.
I have no problem with
Edge right
100.
away.
I have no problem with 100% like they've done. The question is, how much of that 100 is going to come into the thing, which is a function of the absorption. So, I mean, basically all the rain is falling down. So we have to take into consideration all the rain. So that's the whole 100 feet.
Right.
Question is how much of it comes into the street?
But that's a function of all the things we just mentioned, plus the geology and the
Well,
makeup of our
I
soils.
understand that. So anyway,
And these are all been, they've done all these calculations, but if we choose to change some of the parameters that the
Anyway,
council members
so-
mentioned, they would make them
I guess-
adjust those things accordingly.
anyway, so they're the things I think one particular firm can do.
Sure.
The other firm, I think, should look at the EAC plan, which is different than this plan.
I say something.
That was done, I think Steve said for 2030,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken. The EAC plan was
Correct. That's
2030.
2030.
Look at it, update it, say, hey, to bring it up to 2040 or 2050, what would it have to do to change it? And how much would that cost? And I think they're the two things, another firm. So basically two firms, one do one thing, one do the other.
From what I recall from conversation with the EEC guys, that the original, that was outsourced to another vendor.
Yes. So,
I still, and look, and hopefully if you haven't seen this, I emailed this to you, my fancy dancy thing, if you want to take a look at it.
Yeah, always talked about this.
I get what you're saying. We can do costs and back into the level of service. But I also think we should consider what is an acceptable level of service.
Steve, you want to circulate that to the group, please? To people out there that
I
can
don't
see.
know if we have enough.
No, we can just pass it around. So we can see it.
Oh. He's got to know. It's easier to find a cost by inputting a level of service than taking a cost and backing into a level of service. But I think we can do it both ways. You know, we can say we're willing to accept, you know, since our fire trucks are about 14, 16 inches, and Eric would have to tell us exactly, but say they're 14 inches, we're willing to accept 14 inches of water over this low crown of road for 6 hours. I mean, I don't know what it would be. And we're willing to accept that once a year. And that's where it adds it. Let's just say that. That would give them the input variables. They would use these factors that we just went through. They would come out to a system requirement, whatever inch per hour. And then they could do a very high level cost estimate on that. Then I believe, and Robert, you tell me if you're correct, if we gave you a number, you can then backwards into a level of service.
Yeah.
So they can go both ways.
I don't want to use them at all.
That doesn't matter. I'm saying if they can do it, anyone else can do it, right? Because if it's able to be done with a model, I don't have any other engineers sitting next to me besides him. So it's capable of going both ways, is what I'm saying. So I think we can give you what you're looking for.
Okay.
So
Anyway, I think if that's, I guess Fernando's not here, but I guess you and I can agree to do those two
yeah,
things.
I think we are core.
So
We can make the recommendation.
I'll try and get some estimates of what it will cost us, bring it back here, and then we can vote on it.
Sure. If we use vendors that are not under the approved program, is there going to be a problem?
Up to $35,000. He told me it was okay.
So there's, like we mentioned last time, there's a couple factors. If it's above, if they're on our continuing service provider list, then it's okay. The village council can approve anything over $50,000. That's Steve's limit. So anything above that, it will go to the village council. If they are not on our approved list, then if the cost is less than 35,000, then we would not have to bid it under state law. If it's more, then we would have to not bid, but do a request for qualifications. And we would have to qualify firms, and then the council would select the best firm, most qualified firm, and we would negotiate a price on that.
So we don't have any real issue.
No, I mean, we can guide you. I mean, it's hard to talk because I don't know the term. I don't know how much it's going to cost.
Right.
And once we figure out the
Once we-
cost and the scope, I can advise you and Steve directly on the approach that we can take. But that's the universe that we're living in.
So we can go, our group can go out and request proposals directly,
It would
correct?
be requests for qualifications. If I would actually advise that if you do want to do that, that you would go formally through Steve's staff, because there are state requirements that these requests for qualifications have to have when you go out on the street. But yes, if you guys want to tell Steve, I want you to go out for an RFQ to seek a consultant for X, we can help.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So
The bias is there.
we have authority up to 35,000 to go out and pick any firm. We have approximately 5 capable firms on our professional services contract that we can ask to do it. We cannot ask them to compete. Am I correct?
That's correct.
We have to go pick one and say, give me a proposal. We can't say three firms come back and give me
You
your,
can't have them bid against you.
because they've already competed. They're already contractors of the village.
Correct.
The third one that I hear you saying is then we could do then an RFQ that would then lead to a competitive bid process.
Yes.
But we do have 5 capable firms. Some are more capable than others that we could choose from that are existing contractually with the village.
So in other words, at this point in time, we can't ask somebody from Mr. Jones, can you do this particular job? And if you're gonna do the job, you can't give us an estimate of what it's gonna cost. Because basically, the number of hours is a function of what it's gonna cost probably, plus their markup.
Now, we can ask them.
No,
We'll have to pick a firm and then they would come back with a
So
proposal.
my point is, can we do that? And then they say, fine, when it's under $35,000, can we then select them?
If it's under $35,000, then first of all, Steve has the authority under our code. Number one. Number two, this would be a professional service, so we wouldn't have to bid. And number three, underneath the state law, we would not have to bid if it's under.
So we could do that.
35,000.
Okay, thank you.
My concern though, the council member, is since if we go out and get a different firm than AECom, they're not gonna have an existing model. So the likelihood of this costing below 35,000 is pretty slim.
So why don't we just see what
Yeah.
comes back at? Then
It doesn't hurt to find out what they cost.
we spent $200,000 10 years ago to do the EAC model. How many millions we spent for this model? So I think we possibly could get a better price.
You can always ask.
It may be this safer approach, if you think it's gonna be above 35,000, is, Steve.
I would hope it
told-
wouldn't be.
Well, okay, but assuming that it may be, Steve is saying that we do have 5 qualified firms that are on our continuing service list that could do it.
Yep.
Or you could go out to RFQ.
Yeah, fine, okay. Good enough.
I think those are the most reasonable approaches. And we can pick and choose which one would you like to move forward. One is faster. Obviously, if we pick one, someone we have,
Yep.
RFQ would take a significantly longer time.
Yes, Michael.
No, I think we've agreed on the parameters. We just,
I mean, that's basically what we're trying to do, right?
that's our goal.
That's our goal.
Right.
That's what we want to get done.
Right.
And then move forward from there.
Is there anything else we need to talk about this morning?
Let's see.
Opinion?
Well, I don't know if this is the time to bring it back up again. Do we want to recommend to our full council to cease work on the existing plan that we're spending about $8 million on? That'll probably be put on the shelf that we're not going to use.
We could, I could agree to cease or recommend the possibility of ceasing if we do not stop the undergrounding part of that process.
Well, no problem.
And
I agree.
the question really would be to AECom is, what savings are we going to see if we do
Without the undergrounding.
If we do this without the
I
undergrounding?
got you.
Okay, so that's a reasonable question to ask.
Okay,
So,
but one of the questions would be, we keep talking about 60%, 90%. Does that also include the undergrounding of the electric, or is that the storm sewer part of the contract?
We are currently at 90% on the design.
Does that include the
FPL is at 90%. And I think the telecoms are a little behind it, but within 2 or 3 weeks, they'll be at 90% as well. So by the end of,
So it's insignificant.
March, we'll be at 90%.
And I guess the next question is, of their contract, 6.3 million, I think the contract is, how much of that is for undergrounding versus storm sewer?
I don't know the difference, but
Approximately?
I'd like to be on.
So, good morning, Councilman, village staff. So let me understand the question. You're trying to continue the design for just undergrounding for
We're saying-
just phase
saying what
one,
is-
just zone one.
Mike,
My question is, how much is of the 6.3 million, I think your contract is, how much of that's for undergrounding and how much of that is for storm sewer?
So if we're in place, let's say we're in
Mhm.
place at 90% drawings, okay?
Mhm.
And of that delta that's left to finish, how
Mhm.
much of that is in value terms is going to be for stormwater, and how much of the value of that terms is that gonna be for underground?
So-
30-70 split, whatever the split is.
So the majority of the undergrounding design comes directly from the telecom and from FPL. They design what they want, and then what AECom is doing is they are integrating that into the greater stormwater roadway design. So the benefit, what AECom is doing with undergrounding is they're making sure that it fits with everything that we're doing, so there's no conflicts.
Okay, so basically most of it's being.
If you
done by
took out the
FPL.
stormwater portion of the design, you would just be paying the FPL, which was about, I think, it's already paid 200 and something thousand for all of phase one, and then the telecoms.
This is phase one electrical, not phase one.
That's
Not
right.
zone.
But if we're doing just zone one, which is all that we're being authorized to go forward with procurement for contracting, then there might be a slight change, might be an additional cost. I don't have that number yet, but we're looking probably around 20, 30,000. And then if we're gonna still have AECom involved to do deconfliction with any potential future stormwater, then you're probably looking $100,000, again, high
Okay, no, I
level,
understand.
but it's a percentage.
I'm not going to hold you to it.
So, but that that drawing is not what goes for just undergrounding. That is not for permitting for undergrounding. Permitting for underground would be generally local. They have a state permit as long as it's by their designs, so.
And Mike, since you're already theoretically in the position to go for bid, or you're talking to potential vendors for bid, you said that you can bid at 60% bid set. Why do we, just as a question, why do we need to actually finish to bid?
The closer you are to construction drawings for bid, the less change order potential you'll have. So, right. So you want to have as close to your final product.
Understand.
Right.
So you
With
don't,
change orders.
yeah, so you're not, so we're not confident, in other words, to get a hard bid number until you're at 100% CDs.
I think that's what we'd want to do to have the best
Eliminate.
effort
There are other
going forward.
factors.
Minimizes the change
Right.
orders.
Yeah, there are other factors,
And-
is you'd be able to get a full acceptable permit.
Now, there's other benefits, obviously, and the biggest benefit to go out to bid is because you need to have the funding available in order to award the contractor. In order to get that, the bulk of that funding with the SRF loan, you need to have a
100%.
full set of drawings and your front-end documents, so you basically your procurement documents along with your permits. So that's why we are recommending to go forward with this design, because you're already at this point. We're reviewing the 90% right now. And the financial benefits of going forward with this loan are substantial.
So I guess the question is how much delta savings is out there? If we just said pencils down today, okay, and we continued the undergrounding, what would be the delta savings to the community if we decided to stop? So I mean, we're at 6 million,
Right.
or we saving $400,000, we're saving $500,000, we're saving $800,000. How much money will we be saving? And if you don't know the answer, it's fine.
I guess it would be the savings compared to what? So
Compared to
it's
the-
the savings compared to if you
To the
just
total
delayed,
contract value.
compared to if you
What's
did the same
what's the additional
project
money
a
to
year
stop
later.
now to
Right.
completion? I think that's what you're asking.
Mike, let me rephrase. What, if we stop today, okay, and we have let's assume we have a $6 million contract.
Mhm.
How much money would we be saving
Oh.
left on the balance of that contract, assuming that we can actually do that from a legal standpoint?
So how much is remaining in AECOM's
Yeah,
contract?
Yeah,
That,
exactly.
I don't know exactly,
Okay.
but basically you have 10% of that left because they're at 90% design. I think they're billing, it's probably less than 10% of that.
I would imagine
$600,000.
to be conservative, yes.
Somewhere around there. But I don't have all their invoices.
So the AECOM guy says he believes it's close to 150,000. Let's give you an answer. We'll get you an answer.
Okay, and so
So the answer is probably between the two. So let's figure that
So,
answer.
so as another question, assuming that we put pencils down on the design and we wanted to continue to run models through AECOM, okay, to change parameters. I know there's a cost associated with that. What would that cost be to run multiple scenarios using the AECOM model? And if you don't know,
Yeah,
again, Mike,
I don't know if
I'm not asking you
Yeah.
to get to do that right off the top of your head because it's inappropriate.
Black and beige. He's not making, he's not the.
But he's-
Yeah, I can't, I mean,
But
we've asked for some,
We could ask him to give us a
Yes.
quote, right?
but it's gonna depend
Yeah,
on
but
what
Mike was
level of
No, I'm
models
not-
they're gonna
No,
be
he's just
using.
asking if
Yeah,
theoretically.
so I think there's some value, okay, to consider the pencils down, especially if we could use the balance of that cash to run different scenarios through the AECOM model, because at the end of the day, we've already paid for this model, and if we can continue to put different parameters in there, we will get different answers. And those answers are very beneficial to the community based on the fact that, we have, even if we just move the design from 2060 to 2050, we're going to change, right? And I think this is the big for me, this is a conversation on volume of water to move. I mean, I know that's the way Ed's looking at this.
Mhm.
This is kind of the way I'm looking at it is, okay, if we're making these assumptions, how much water do we need to physically move, and how much time is it going to take to move that water? To bring it down to a more lay person's understanding. So to me, I would like to know from AECOM how much it's going to cost to run different scenarios through the model. Okay. Is this just somebody sitting here with a laptop changing four different parameters and popping out different numbers? Because if it is, we can almost do that ourselves if we had access to them. I'm being a little facetious, but if it is a massive Excel program or some type of database program, we should be able to feed in different parameters and get different iterations, correct?
Simple answer, it can be done.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
It's,
but
it's not
there-
simple, but it can be done.
Yeah, you need to have the software and the software
The
license. and know how to
question
use
is,
it.
the question is I'd like to see an RFP I'd like to see numbers from them to say,
Mhm.
okay, how much this is going to cost to run multiple scenarios.
I mean, for example, we had them run multiple scenarios just to change intermediate high to intermediate for 2020, 2040, 2050, 2060. In
Can you-
preparation for this meeting.
Can you share that
Ro-
information today?
We can.
Robert has that.
We
Yes,
have, we
do
have, we have,
that,
a-
yes.
you know,
And how much did that cost us roughly?
they did that pro bono for us.
Oh, they
They-
did that okay, good. All right,
They did.
so-
We did ask them and they said they were gonna include that in.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we got that as a.
Councilmember, can I go back? I'm concerned about the pencil down thing. And I know it sounds good,
The pencil down.
the pencil down thing. You know, we've spent 4 years to get to where we are. We literally have 2 more months till we get to 100%. There is value in 100% design. First of all, the design itself, which means you have a full CD, which is important. Secondly, you will have gone completely through permitting, which will tell you what we're trying to do is permittable or not permittable. We'll learn quite a bit from that. And then thirdly, and there's probably more, but these are the 3 most important ones, is we are on a timeline to attempt to get money from the state, both from Resilient Florida, where our grant requests are due, and for the state revolving fund, where our loan request is due. After visiting them in Tallahassee last week, if we choose to change those designs somewhat, it is still acceptable. I mean, if we went from pump system to a well system, that wouldn't be accepted. But if we went from a pump system at its current capacity to a lower capacity, could continue to use those funding sources. So if we put this down right now, we obviously lose the potential for that money this year. And as things are going, that money may not be there in the future. We may then have to be forced to just use the GOB, which is only $100 million, and that would then restrict what we would have for the future. The state is going to offer us a loan at 0.5 to 0.8% on the state revolving fund versus the GOB, which is running about 4.5%. So we also have to think about it from a financial perspective as well.
So they've committed to you to give you the 48 or $50 million.
They can't commit to us today. What we have to do is we have to submit an application by June 27th. And we will be highly competitive for that.
Competitive meaning other people want the same amount of money or different amounts of money. And there's a fund that only has so much amount of money in it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we really don't know what we're going to get.
Correct.
No, but we won't know if we don't have 100%
But we
design.
won't, but my point is, after we submit it, we won't know what we're going to get. So they give it to us.
We'll find out in August.
Find out in August. But Steve, if we would decide to proceed, okay, and get the 100% set, go out and go for this funding source, you're saying, just to make sure it's clear, that there's an 8.8% loan, 0.08% loan.
Between 0.5 and 0.8% loan over 20 years.
So
And we
that's
wouldn't have to start paying back until after the construction's complete. Versus a GOB where you start immediately.
So that, all right, but that's a loan, that's not a grant.
No, it's a loan.
It's a loan.
No,
It's
the interest rate's great.
at
though.
0.5%, that's
Right.
pretty much free money.
That's free money.
That's free money because we don't have to pay it back until we
Oh,
complete the
It's
project.
like a construction firm for, the regular construction, commercial construction. You have a construction loan with the building's property done, then you start amortizing. That's what he's talking about. Which is pretty well standard in the construction business. Oh, I mean, loan business. I'm sorry.
But I think it's important for us to know the numbers, okay? Not that we have to make that decision. Actually, we can't, it's not on our purview to make the
No.
decision. But I think it's important for the community to know what those numbers are, okay? So
Which specific numbers?
whether it's, pencils down, how much is the delta left, okay? Just so that we can say, all right, well, we already spent 6 million. If we spend another 500,000, we get complete. At least we know what the number, we know what those numbers are so that we can, at least the community knows what they are.
And I would say just for planning factor, it's somewhere between 120,000 and $600,000. And we'll get obviously a much more.
The other thing I think we should really talk about, and I everybody hates to make a mistake. We all hate to make mistakes, but sometimes it's better to cut your losses short than to make more mistakes. And we say, listen, we'll be about close to $8 million between Bracken Beach and ACOM on these plants. If we don't use them, we decide we'll go to a well system. It's still better to say, hey, take that loss rather than go ahead and spend another 100 million on something you didn't need. So, and I don't think we as council have to feel bad that we made a mistake. Hey,
I don't disagree with you.
well, that's fine.
Yes.
You disagree with
No,
me.
I don't.
So
disagree
I'm
with
saying, and this happens, fine. And it's much better. The numbers sound large, but they're insignificant to what the whole system is going to cost us if in fact we made that mistake. And we just say, hey, we did it. And they'll take away our salary. They'll take away my piece. I mean, what the hell are they going to do to
But
us?
so let's also
They're gonna-
not make a decision.
I'm not saying make
just
a
to
decision.
just to make a statement
I'm just saying we
and
don't
save
want-
$150,000.
we don't want to go ahead and go forward and plow ahead just because we decided to spend this money up until now, and we don't want to lose it. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. Saying we decide to change. You look at the system and say, you know what? All you needed was so many new shallow gravity what do you call them, injection wells, or blah blah blah. And you don't need all this, or you need something different.
We agreed we have the opportunity to pivot. The question, I just think we need to know what the numbers are, and then we can make that decision.
But I'm just saying, all I'm saying is that mindset, we have to get the mindset.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's better to take the first loss, if that's going to be, than to keep plowing money away for something we don't need. That's all.
I don't think anybody's in
Well,
disagreement.
listen, it's tough to go ahead and tell somebody you decided to do something. Yeah, we did. You make decisions, you make mistakes.
That's what we're elected to do.
And hopefully, we make more right decisions than wrong decisions. I think Mike, want to ask the people, the residents here, if they want to say anything, since they have some residents here.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we do that, I think it's appropriate to take a look at these curves. Okay, we asked ACOM to run the sensitivity analysis with the different for immediate high to
Intermediate.
intermediate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
At 2040, 2050, and
Okay,
2060.
could they just show us what the percentage of delta changes in total volume of water? That would be very useful. Just so we can see how much sensitivity actually it is. Because this may not be that significant relative to the water intensity of the rain.
So what we're seeing here is that we ran the intermediate high for 2020, 2040, 2050, and 2060. So in 2020, we did two different methods. We used the NRCS method and then South Florida Water Management District's method. And-
Could you do me a favor, slow it down a little bit and
Walk me through this.
let's explain the acronyms to the community so everybody understands what we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. It's all right. And just get comfortable. This is a conversation. You're not doing a presentation. So just, please. So we need, just so people understand all
Do
the.
you mind if I grab a chair to do this as well so I can
Yeah,
navigate?
you grab a chair.
I don't like it so panicky with public speaking.
No, no one likes it. I don't particularly care for it.
That's
either.
why you're an engineer, Robert.
I know.
That's why you use your brain, not your mouth. We like it.
I'm the
We
nerd
love
that
you, man.
sits in the back closet, tells
You
everyone
know
what
what?
the answer is.
We're looking for you to give us some information. Be comfortable. Don't, this is not, we're not grilling you. Okay. We're trying to have an interaction. So slow it down and just explain to us what we're talking about.
Podium so they can see.
Oh, okay. That's a good call. All right, so to get to that number, we had to develop what engineers call a curve number. That is basically, it's a ratio that tells us how much water is just running off. But by By doing so, it'll also tell us what's going into the ground. So South Florida Water Management District, they have their own criteria of how to do it. So we use that method, and then we also use the TR55, which is a NRCS method. That's also another commonly approved method by engineers, or as an engineering standard. So what that looks at is basically the as far as NRCS method, it'll look at how much area is pervious, how much is impervious. So we have to quantify like lots, roads, building paths, and get an understanding of the.
I'll always stop you for 1 second. So the only parameters that you've changed on this model, okay, is just the curve. Okay, so just let me finish,
Yeah.
and then you can qualify. Okay, so the rain intensity stayed the same.
Yes.
Okay, the parameter of amount of capture from street,
Yes.
from the edge of Steve, what's the word called again? From the
Contributing area.
contributing area. Okay, the contributing area water has stayed the same. So we're assuming 100% of coverage, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what other parameter would? So there are 4 parameters, right? So the time horizon, the time horizon has
amount of,
changed. Okay,
yeah.
So we've changed 2.
Yes, yes, but we've analyzed over 4 different periods.
Okay.
And so going back to, we've had to quantify basically the topography of your area, what's pervious, what's impervious, the elevations of that, and then also the part that changes based upon the sea level rise curve, that changes how much soil storage that we have, and that's represented here, and it changes throughout what we call as engineers a curve number.
So just to qualify, so we're saying that since the sea level curve is staying here, and the top of the dirt is here, we're talking about that volume of storage capacity that would be in the soil. Okay.
Yeah. So and we use 2 different methods, so we could do a composite. So because there's 4 primary methods that you can use. There's the Horton method, there's RIAP, South Florida, and NRCS, and we use the 2 most commonly used ones. And so what we have here in this box is 98.3. So that's what the new one is with your new selected sea level rise curve. What it used to be is 98.7. So there's a small change. There's a
89.
oh, sorry.
Talking about 89.7 versus 89.3.
Yeah,
right?
so there's a delta of 0.04. And we've gone through that for all of these. Now, when I plug them into the model to get you an idea of can we change the amount of water that we're pumping based upon how that sea level rise curve changes. This table, a little engineering, a little too technical, but I'll try to walk you through it the best I can. So the top here, those are those curve numbers that we calculated. And then these are, geographical areas or sub-basins of your village. And then this is.
So let me stop you again. So these BNP 06, 12, 26, these are points on the map.
They're a basin, or I call them bowls. So number 6 is actually the school. So if you think of the school, that is represented by those values.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So this column right here is what is in our stormwater master plan that we have presented to you. And in that, we have a curve of 95. If I look at the worst case scenario, where I'm using a different sea level rise curve in a different time horizon, and that is 89.3, the difference in elevation, just by changing that, is 0.02 or 0.02 feet difference in stage. So by changing the sea level rise curve does not materially allow you to reduce your pumping capacity. It is not a large enough contributor to that. What it does do is it buys you the ability to use different discharge methods, such as wells, but not by reducing the volume of water that needs to be pumped. So that would disprove Ed's notion of that more would go in. Additionally, what it would do is provide you some cost savings as it relates to roadway reconstruction, because now you don't have to worry about sunny day flooding event at a higher elevation. So your reconstruction cost would be less.
Now you say,
So let's step back before I step back for a second. So how much a percentage of water reduction to move would this change in curve generate? In other words,
I would have to quantify that. I don't have that number
Yeah,
here, but
okay,
like,
but you have it in a percentage basis. So just, yeah. We don't do the same thing you're
Yeah.
doing. So I'm trying to understand it in a volume of water. Okay. Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, this is about how much water we have to move.
yeah,
Okay. So if we could quantify roughly the amount of water from the original model
yes,
and the amount of water from the different changes, then two lay guys can sort of say, okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
How much water do we now have to move off the street? And then we can discuss how much time it takes for that water to move off the street, which is obviously the thing that people are most concerned about.
we can certainly provide that, but just, you know, because I know elevation is kind of abstract to most people that deal with this type of modeling, but 0.02 is such a small, you know, it's like a rounding error for us. The other point that I would like to make as it relates to absorption. So we've produced this graph here. This peaking one that's in like a darker blue, that is the inches per hour of intensity of the South Florida Water Management District curve that we have to follow to get a permit. So our level of service has to be defined to some standard that will get us a permit and get it approved.
Okay.
So this is what South Florida has. Now the dotted line is how the soil will act as water goes into it. So you see in the beginning, this first hour, you have the soil has the ability to absorb water. But over time, because those pores or like when you think about soil, it's like the void space in between all these little grains, that initially gets filled up at the top. And then it has to, as it pushes in, it has to move air out. And so, and it'll also become saturated. So this bottom part right here that it goes across, you can see there's virtually no absorption. Now, we've done it as a cumulative, as total that can come in. This is that darker orange. So you could see the peak, the difference between this peak and where you are right here in that storm. That's the difference in capacity that you don't have, and why we have to move so much water, why the pump station is sized the way it is.
Right. So this effectively, the orange to the top of the blue is the worst case scenario.
That you're trying to fight
The volume
against.
of water that has to move, correct?
Yeah,
So there's
so-
effectively at that time period, no absorption. Okay,
Yes.
or the absorption is, let's not say there's no absorption. The absorption is completed. So there's,
Yeah.
the soil is now fully saturated.
Yes.
Okay. There's no more water that's going to go into the ground. We have assumed that column of water is now full. So all this water is now piling
Yes.
in the environment. We have to move it. Correct?
Yes. And so there's the other thing you have going against you is your topography.
So effectively it's flat. Yeah.
Yeah. So like in other areas where you could have swales, that could eat up some of that difference, but you don't have that. So that's what's really driving your inches per hour of pumping requirements.
So if we would remove the 100% coverage of lot, we would now go to 50% coverage of lot. This is going to change as well, correct?
It would, but there
Not-
is
Not dramatically, is that what you're saying?
well, the total volume would decrease, so your pump station could decrease, but that will affect your ability to collect taxes because your taxes are based upon this rate study, and so now you're reducing the amount of benefits, the difference in benefits that each homeowner gets. So you'll have to redo your rate study to be able to do that.
If we don't use 100% coverage?
Yeah, because now you're basically saying that the benefit between a condo owner and a homeowner is the difference is not there.
Okay,
So
so-
what they pay as a percentage,
So what they're paying is a delta difference, is not, so we're assuming 100% coverage, and then any available space you have that's able to absorb water is actually a credit back. Is that what you're saying? On the tax,
No.
on the tax purposes?
no, it's I don't think I'm explaining it correctly enough. Yeah, Tom, are you available to explain this one?
By the way, it's not a tax, it's a fee.
Yeah.
Yes. So what Robert's trying to say is if we reduced the area completely and we made everybody retain all of their water, then the only nexus to your stormwater fee is the fact that people could travel on the roads. And so at that point, since everyone is responsible for their own water, a condo unit is the same as a residential unit. If we were going to split it in half, then I would agree that that would be a credit back to, or there'd be some portion of a credit, they'd be paying a half of a share or something like that.
I don't think we should be thinking about the cost of doing another rate study
No,
and
no.
compared to what we're talking about, the millions of dollars here. So we have to do a rate study. If we change it, we do a rate study because that's insignificant cost of money we're spending at this point in time. Also, but you mentioned the difference between 20,050 low and 20,060 intermediate high is 12.5 inches more of sea level rise. So basically 12.5 inches lower. That 12.5 inches doesn't absorb any water, no more capacity to store any water.
You're only allowed-
It does. And Robert, two things. One, the question was asked about percentages. That is on the graph of the curve number that you showed earlier. Secondly, if you would go back to the actual curve number calculation and show Mr. London the table of South Florida soil values and what they look like on the lower end of the from 1 to 1.5 feet to the groundwater table, how relatively small they are, as opposed to the further you separate from the groundwater table, the more soil storage you get, because the capillary rise is less and it doesn't impact the void spaces.
Agreed completely. And if you say that the average house elevation here would be, we'll say 8.5 feet above sea level, and you're talking about ground level coming up, and we'll say it comes up to 2 feet above sea level, there's 6 feet of storage area. Now you're gonna say, yeah, but you got old homes here. And I'm saying, yeah, but in 20,050, all those old homes will be gone, and they're gonna have to be brought up to a minimum of 8.5 feet above, because basically we have a rule that says it can't be more than 2.5 feet below BFE, and we have BFE +1, which is 11 right now. We're probably going to change that to 12 or 13. So as a result, there's going to be plenty of ground to absorb the water. So like you said, I agree with you completely. The further we are from the groundwater, the more the water the ground can absorb. So why are we looking at all the whatchamacallits, the macro houses, which are 5 and 6 feet above sea level, versus the majority of the homes, which are closer to 8 feet above sea level, 7 feet above sea level. I mean, excuse me, above groundwater level. That's what I'm talking
So,
about.
and I don't disagree, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to push these complementary ordinances through. So if we ask them to take in consideration these ordinances, which is going to go from BFE +1 to whatever we choose to go, that also changes the model they'll use as well.
Even today, Steve, basically, you're looking at, FEMA came into when, in 1974? When they came with the BFE, we had to build BFE above that? I think 1974. Tom, do you know when it came in? Somewhere around
That's
there, right?
about right. 74 to 78, somewhere in that neighborhood.
And then ours is 9 and 10 feet, our BFE. So basically, the east side up the middle of Woodcrest is 9 feet. West of Woodcrest, middle thing is 10 feet. Out on Master Point in one place, I think it's 13 or 14 feet. By the beach is an area where it's 8 feet, but primarily we're a 10-foot area. So a 10-foot area, 2.5 feet below, we're at 7.5 feet for at least 70% of the homes today that are under this area. So why are we considering that? Why are we looking at it? Because basically, if we go to 20,050, everything is going to be up to that level or higher, because when we build it now, it's even a higher BFE.
If we want them to make that assumption, they can, but the engineers have a duty licensed by the state to not create a system that's going to damage homes as they exist. If we-
I didn't
if
say
we-
damage it today.
No, but I know, but so if we want to give them a factor that is going to change that, that will adjust their considerations. Am I correct, Robert?
You're correct.
mean,
And we can give them those.
That would have to be a,
Sorry,
that would have to
sorry.
be a design directive from the village to us.
That's reality.
Okay, so that's.
It's an
that's
assumption,
but It's a
Well,
parameter that we can
the
adjust.
model is based on reality. It's based on the actual physical LiDAR data and the elevations of the roads and the low homes as they exist. If you wish to tell us to project into the future what you think it will be and design a system for that, we can do that. But we can't do that unless you tell us to do that.
Are you considering in your model the fact that we have a retaining wall around the houses? I think it's 6 inches minimum. The fact that we've been, for the last God knows how many years, saying the houses had to be graded to retain at least the first 1 inch of water on the property? Have you taken that into consideration in your model?
Not to that degree, house by house or
Okay,
lot
fine.
by lot, no.
Good. Anyway, okay, thank you.
They're doing the model in the aggregate.
I also saw your curve numbers, which were slightly different than this, on one of your papers you gave us, where you used the two numbers of 55 and the CN thin curve and decided to use, I think, the CN rather than the CN 55. And I think the difference between one was about 1.2 times and one was 1.5 times the amount of water capacity based on those curves. And it doesn't appear to be on these curves. I don't have the information with me, and I'm probably pretty brain dead and forgot, but to the best of my knowledge, that's what I remember.
So I think the,
And these curves, these numbers and curve numbers see completely different what you gave us in writing. I'll find it.
Well, that's because you've just asked us to do the intermediate versus the intermediate high, so that will change that number.
All right.
yeah, so with the question, sorry, for me, I'm trying to understand if when we go to this lower curve, okay, how much difference in water volume are we having to move?
Cubic feet per second.
Right-hand columns, Robert, the 3.
Decreased runoff as a percent right here. Sorry.
Right.
So in 2020, it's a difference by 0.69%. And then out to 2060, it's a difference of 4.05%.
Of total water?
Yes.
So it's 5% difference of total water? Is that what that's saying?
Of water that would be absorbed.
No, I'm
Even
talking-
though a foot,
I'm sorry?
even though the difference between 2050, I think 2050 and 2060 between the intermediate high and the low is 12.5 inches of additional ground to absorb water.
Well, considering that the upper half of that 30 inches that we're talking about puts the water at the ground surface, meaning you essentially have zero storage. Now you've lowered it to 12 inches, which is a very thin lens of available soil storage that we can use. So it's a number, it's a benefit, but it's not, it doesn't move you into the break away from the capillary rise and give me a lot of volume available.
And one thing that we could add is your previous stormwater master plans are in line with our assumptions. So EAC, Tetra Tech, and William Hatfield and Stoner all are basically saying the same thing that we are saying, is that absorption is not a reliable means of discharge, and that the soil conditions are such that they're not well draining soils. So
because this is sand,
I'm sorry?
because effectively it's sand.
Very silty sand.
Yes.
Yeah, silty sand. So we're making the assumption that silty sand has approximately 5% of total volume to absorb water. Is that what we're saying? So in other words, if you had a glass of marbles and a glass of sand, and you pour water into the glass of marbles, you're going to hold a lot more water in the glass of marbles than on the sand.
That's a
So
great
Correct.
going back to the basic geology function here. So what what I think keep driving at is that the amount of available absorption because of the soil type is so minimal
Yes.
that at the highest level of peak of intensity, we're really not gaining any storage capacity, whether we add 12 inches, 16 inches, or 20 inches based on the sea level curve. You're saying that because of the soil type, there is very limited an amount of absorption capacity there. Is that a
It's
good
not
summary of what you're saying?
not specifically limited, but that because of the way that Robert, can you show the graph that I have with the surface water runoff, the soil graph, the one that follows this one, or the companion to that one. Do you have that?
I'm not sure.
You don't have it. So what the point being is that the way, leave that one, Robert, please. That graphic you just had. The way that South Florida makes it rain, where you see that the available soil storage is consumed, that 1.5 or 2 inches that we're saying is there is consumed in the first 9 hours of rainfall. And then where you see those lines cross, that's where now, as you had said earlier, that becomes surface water runoff. And that volume that there it becomes that's the issue that we face. It's not that we're not saying that there isn't any. We're saying that what is there based on the regulatory storm that we have to model is that and it was done purposefully, that in the first 8, 9, 10 hours of the storm, whatever soil storage you have available generally gets consumed, and then the next 2, 3 hours of the great big slug of water that comes is generally largely runoff.
Got it. And Tom, the point of intersections is basically the point of absorption loss, correct? I mean, with
Yeah, that's where
when the line
that's where
comes
they
across-
become equal. There's a little
Yeah.
bit better cumulative graph, but it's pretty close to 9 hours where those two cross, and then your rainfall and your completely and your available capacity become equal, and then everything beyond that is runoff. I mean, you
So
get
just to
you still get the 1/10 of an inch that's down there per hour, but when I get a 2.8 inch input and I have a 1/10 of an inch infiltration deduction, we're not saying it doesn't exist. We're saying it's insignificant to the 2.8 versus 2.7 is, you're still getting a lot of water.
Sure.
So Tom, Steve here. So that peak right there in the middle, just almost underneath 2.75, that will
Correct.
happen 2 times in 10 years, correct?
Based on the historic rainfall, and now mind you, the design storm is the 1 in 10 year service, and based on our historic rainfall, we've actually had that twice in 10 years. So it's happened more frequently than what would be
Either way, it's infrequent, but obviously potentially damaging.
infrequent,
But
but
if we took the-
we
took
have
the
to.
area, yeah, follow me on this one. If we took the area above the orange line, yeah, so let's just say that triangle, so to speak,
Yeah,
that's really becomes our issue. It's just not obviously the peak is the worst case scenario, but what's more important is
that delta.
that triangle right there, that delta above the curve.
Correct.
How many times does that happen in a 10-year period?
Right. The breakover.
Right. And
what
you
would
can
be
see
the
that
adequate outfall or discharge requirement to address that? And can we
right.
come up with
So as
an
you see,
intermediate between
basically,
high and orange?
if you get anything over, depending on where you're at in the curve, but let's say if you had a storm that was 3 hours long and it rained more than an inch, you're going to have surface water runoff because your cumulative soil storage is only, is right around an inch or
But
less.
we can accept some though, Tom, and I think that's where that
No, I
goes back to the
understand.
level of
I
service
completely
study. Yeah.
understand. But the whole point here is that we're not ignoring it. In fact, the orange line that you see here is the actual. There are 6 soil tests in the prior in the Tetra Tech and Williams Hatfield Stunner report, this is the actual average of those 6 soil boring tests. The others are NRCS recommended numbers, or so. I mean, this is based on the information we have. This is reality, and so the cumulative line, the cumulative graph is, you know, any rainfall in that time period above that line is runoff.
It's going to cause flooding.
So,
Some degree of surface water.
so just to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about. So this, the orange line is anything above the orange line in that triangle is water that we have to move off the street.
Correct.
Can I ask a silly question? Obviously, we help the engineers and the architects because we require them to design the houses, the lots to retain water. And to make it easy for them, we actually give them a format to follow and says, listen, take the height of your house, take the area of your house, take the area of your coverage, get the groundwater, and we said assume 2 feet, subtract that from what your finished lot line is going to be, and then they will tell you how many inches the water will be absorbed. And we tell people that if it's more than 4 feet, we absorb 8.18 inches of water. Now, of course, you're saying we only absorb 1. So we've been telling every engineer and every architect that designs anything and keep us saying that we're just misleading them. And we're doing that today because we have that same, we're still using the same worksheet. So it is so contrary to what you're, to reality by watching it rain and seeing what goes in the ground, by what we tell people and what these guys are telling us by these curves. These curves might be a model, but how close are they to reality? That's all.
If I may, there's the hypothetical, and there's the what we have to do in order to pull a permit to construct a system. There are regulatory standards that we have to follow, and that rainfall curve is one of them. The other thing that Mr. London, is when you talk about all the houses will be raised, then the houses can be raised, but then you also have to correspondingly raise the roads. And
yes, we're going to have to raise the roads, obviously. If your sea level projections are correct, we're going to have to raise roads. We can't do that today because of the macro houses, but in the future, we're going to have to raise them because they'll be underwater.
It's a little bit of a catch-22, right? Because we have to design a system that demonstrates compliance with level of service. And Miami-Dade County has a code that says that thou shalt not flood the crown of road for the 5-year storm. And the 5-year storm looks, you know, it's not 2.7 inches, but it's 2.3 or 2.4 inch peak. And so you're still going to have an issue. And so if I have to, it's, you know, it's kind of the cart before the horse kind of thing. You know, I have to do a project and a model that demonstrates that whatever I'm proposing to build is in compliance with my model. And
so Tom, you basically you unless we tell you to change parameters and direct it from us as the village, you have to design to these specific requirements based on the soil absorption that is available in the community, correct?
Correct.
All right. So for us to pull a permit, we have to meet these criteria.
Correct.
Right? Okay, I feel like I'm speaking to God because
I apologize. I have that. I have been told that before, but yes.
Okay, so so since we're having these conversation, the parameter that appears to be the most effective on the design is the rain intensity. Is that correct?
Rainfall intensity, yes. I have said in multiple, it's not how much it rains a day, it's how much it rains an hour is kind of what your issue is.
What I'm driving at is the parameter that is most affecting the model is not the sea level rise curve, which this data sort of confirms. It's the amount of rain that comes down at a specific time So once we've hit the absorption factor, now we have the volume of rain. So if we get a high level of intensity of rain, that's really the driver for the design. Is that correct? Or am I-
That's correct. And you basically have, you know, you could design to the 100-year storm, the 50-year storm, the 25-year storm. We chose the 10-year storm because that's the minimum level of stormwater master planning that gives you credit for the community rating score, which is tied to your FEMA flood insurance. We could drop
So-
down to the minimum. The absolute minimum we can do is the 5-year storm, because that's where the code references tie into crown of
we
road
still-
elevations.
Can we still get a permit at 5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Does FEMA 2.0 have anything to do with community rating systems? Is that going to replace community rating systems on individual rates for individual houses? As I understand, that's what's happening.
No, it does not.
Does he know?
Steve said
They're
it.
changing
I
that.
I do not know. I can
The
ask
community
some of
rating
our
systems.
people that work for
Don?
FEMA.
I can tell you that it definitely affects the flood insurance rate going to FEMA 2.0, because it now puts the risk on the actual home or the area.
Not the community.
And On,
Not the community, on the home.
on the home.
On the individual
in
property, yes.
community. As an example, my flood insurance 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a little more, was $700. I dropped it. I was required by citizens to get flood insurance, get citizens. It was $12,000 because of the change in FEMA in October of 21.
Yeah, that's,
So-
that
It's
corresponds.
significant. And I don't think it, and I'm 1 foot above BFE. So if I went another foot above, what was it gonna drop to 11? It's whatever you're doing here, I don't think is
Significant.
that FEMA is gonna give you credit for significant way with flood insurance unless they reevaluate and have a FEMA 3.0.
So he's correct. You know, risk rating 2 did make it property specific, risk based.
Right.
But that did not adjust the way that they calculate the community rating system
Well, they're supposed to make it actuarially significant also, rather than basically subsidized. Right now, it's been subsidized for years.
on what they'll charge, right? But the community rating system, and this is important. So, we are currently at an 8. We're going for a 6. And just so what that means, obviously, there's a number of things that you have to do in order to do that, all what are good for the community. The payoff, besides all the factors you do, is that every point that you reduce it, it's a 5% decrease in property tax. So if we go from an 8 to a 6, it'll be a 10% decrease in property.
So my question really
Yeah,
is.
sorry. Yeah, insurance rate, sorry.
Will the fact that they're now rating individual homes, will the community rating system mean anything?
Yes, it's layered on top of it.
Why?
That's just a calculation.
Well,
That's how.
normally, insurance, you just don't say because of layered on top. Normally, if you're rating this thing, you're looking at individual homes, individual risks. You're not looking community-wide risk. We're grouping everything together. That's what I'm asking. Before, yes, before they did individuals, I would assume they did
So
everything
risk rating
together.
2 does do it based on an individual property, but the community rating system, which is why it's called community rating system, if you take a number of considerations, these are multiple factors. What they do is they then give you credit on top of that, which will reduce your.
John, if we want to hear you, we got to actually unfortunately come up to the mic. Just Jocelyn requested it. Thank you for the purpose of the community.
So
Thanks.
to clarify, it's the only individual property factor that the FEMA is based upon is the base flood elevation of your home.
Period.
It doesn't take into account how much you contribute to stormwater runoff
community.
or anything. No, it's based upon that,
That's what I thought.
based upon the entire community's rating and whether you're in an A zone or a B zone, et cetera. But it's only that one value, the base flood elevation of your lowest floor.
So John, just to make sure that I follow what Steve said. So if we go from a 8 to a 6, we're going to get a 10%.
I don't
Yeah,
have
so
that.
so that's different. What
information.
he's talking about is individual.
No, but
Insurance.
I'm talking about layering it over the total.
Yes,
So
If he says he's paying
You know what,
12,000,
12,000 was the price.
so if we
that
would
have
move from
been
a CRS of 8 to 6, that would
Fine,
save him
okay.
$1,200.
okay, so yeah, theoretically it would save you 1,200. The question
It's
is how.
insignificant compared to the raise that happened to go to FEMA 2.0.
significantly.
I'm also talking about how much that compounds over time. You know, if we continue to, is there the significant investment to make to move us from 8 to 6? It may not be worth that in the compounded value over someone's insurance value.
Well, what's gonna happen with, in my prediction, is with sea level rise, the FEMA is gonna come in and reevaluate
And just drop us all.
communities, and they're gonna go from a BFE of 10 to
We can go
12.
higher. No, we'll
And
go higher.
so it's still, you know, everything else being the same, the rates should be the same because you're moving up your base flood, your lowest level floor to match, to get a minimum credit from FEMA or
Correct.
go a foot above it. So it's not gonna change.
But for people that have a Mackle house, it's just going to continue,
It's gonna,
eventually become unaffordable. Yeah,
well, then there aren't gonna be Mackle homes, I agree. So
very good.
at some point, I'd like to talk about some of the things when the engineers are finished.
The one thing people should know, which we should tell people, I mean, nothing to do with this, but John brought up a good point. If you're locked in today with FEMA flood insurance or subsidized flood insurance, they only can raise that for what percentage it is, 10, 12%. If you're owner occupied, if you're not owner occupied, I think they can raise 18% if it's a rental, everything else. But if you come back like John comes in, they come back at the actuarial rate, what the real risk is, and that's the killer. So we really should have it out and put out to the community. Do not drop it. If you're gonna
Drop
have
your
flood
flood
insurance,
insurance.
do not drop it now, because you want to get it back, you will pay the actual rate. And the difference could be, like you say, between 1,000 and 12,000, and this house is above flood level. Imagine you get somebody who's at 6 feet, what they're gonna cost them. So that's really,
And we can do that again. You know, when the entire, with the process was going through risk rating 2, we put it out 4 to 6 times to the community. I think we presented to the council a number of times, but you know, we can do that again.
no, just get it out to people that this is really important. Don't let it drop, because if it drops, then you gotta bring it back.
Then you go back up.
You go back to actuarial rate. You don't go back to 18% or 10% more. You go to the actuarial rate. It's the real rate.
So,
So if I may, back to the amount of water that you have to move. So
before you, Tom,
if,
before you get there,
if,
please,
sure.
sir, if you could just, is there a way to take the base parameters, okay, meaning that the minimal parameters that are required by county and state ordinance, and run those through the current design model and get us the base? Are you following me? So you said right
Yes,
now we
sir.
design around a 10-year storm. If we go to a 5-year storm, if we
Go to 25 feet.
if we use the intermediate low, and then we run all that again, how much difference in volume of water will we be discussing moving? Okay. Discharge water.
Yes, certainly can do that.
And can we also give them the factor of making an assumption that we would be at BFE +2 or BFE +3, so they can also eliminate the concern for damages on existing homes? Because that'll also help them calculate as well.
One more time, Steve.
So this goes back to Councilmember London saying that by 2050, all Mackles would potentially be gone. If we are to create an ordinance, or the market will do it, whatever it happens. If you heard them before, right now they have to design a system that causes no damage to existing property.
That's out to 2050, if that's what the design
Currently,
criteria. Yeah.
for them, in order to design a system to 2050, they can make the assumption that none of those houses would exist and they'd all be at BFE 2 or BFE 3, whatever it is, whatever parameter we want to do. Then they could create a system that they wouldn't have to be concerned about damaging that property.
And we would assume that the lot.
You're looking for a total baseline system. Am I right, Tom?
To Mr. London's point, then if we assume all the lots or the houses are raised, and we assume the lots are raised, and that the road would be 18 inches, 20 inches higher than it is today, whatever, then we would get more infiltration into the ground, because based on those improved lots. So we can do it both ways. We can do it one assuming and one without. And then the other point then would be, if we drop to the 5-year storms, Miami-Dade County Code says, 5-year, we have to keep flooding below the centerline crown of road. Now, the other point that would be a significant mover in the amount of water that would be moved is the contributing area. Right now, we have 100% consistent with your prior stormwater management plans. If we were to assume half of the lot, a 50-foot offset, and assume that the residents are going to retain half, and then we design a system for that, or 25 feet, to pick, if we pick a different offset from the right-of-way line, right now it's 100, full depth of the lot. We could go to 50, we could go to 25. And what I would do then is say that, all right, our system is designed for our right-of-way, which is our responsibility, plus 25 feet. And then we would design our system to meet the code based on that. However, in reality, we're going to get 100% of the water until such time as those lots are rebuilt and they retain their own water. So over time, as this resilient redevelopment occurs, your system will get better and better and better and better. But right now, even though I would design a system that, even though I say it meets code, may in a 5-year storm flood 6, 7, 8, 9 inches because we're getting twice the water than it was designed for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
In some sort of convoluted, twisted way. But the only issue there is we have to convince Miami-Dade County that's an acceptable way to go, to make sure that they don't kick it back. And we would do that before we.
What I think that does is that gives us a number that we can look at, and then we can sort of value engineer from high to low, right? So what you're doing here is basically saying this is the minimum that we could design to.
Correct.
And then we can add back if we choose, or subtract, either way, but this is the minimum. So I think that would be very useful to know, Ed, what that minimum was.
And then I think we also then would have to identify the risks that we would be assuming.
For sure. I mean, but I want to try to look at this as a percentage of volume of water, okay,
I
just so
understand
that we can all kind of understand it.
Right, and area is going to be a direct correlation to volume of water. So 7 inches over 100 acres is 700 acre feet or whatever, but 7 inches over 50 acres is half that amount of water. So the area is a direct correlation.
Sure. Okay, and
Tom, you have the village-wide finished floor elevation analysis by zone. And then it talks about the number of homes in each zone. And then it says the known finished floor elevation, understand all that. And then it says finished floor elevation less than 3 feet, 3.35 feet,
I believe. Yeah.
above groundwater. I assume
it's
that is
effectively
right.
it's 14 homes that are below.
Is that what I'm talking about?
It's the number of homes that are
Originally we were assuming that we would raise, or the minimum road crown would be 2.85. And then that 3.35 is 2.85 plus 6 inches over the crown of the proposed road. Currently, we're looking at, based on the NOAA intermediate high curve, we're looking at a low crown of road to meet their base separation, or separation of the bottom of the road from the water table, 3.2. So we're the crown of road right now on the plans that you see is like 3.25 minimum. But this was an estimate of if we went crown of road plus 6 inches, then how many homes would be affected?
14.
So right now we're assuming it's 2.85, but this was in case we raised it
Right.
to
So right now,
3.25.
if you envision that the crown of road is that middle column, 3.35, it's close enough that if we raise the road to 3.35, and we call that and we design a 5-year storm, not to exceed that, then the number of homes below 3.35 would be affected by this design directly.
Question for you. Just to refresh my memory, before we're using NAVD in 1929, now we're using 1987 or something?
NAVD 88, it's 1.5 feet difference. A comes before G, so A is always lower.
How many feet? I'm sorry.
1.5,
Oh.
approximately.
1.5.
approximately.
I guess you had 1.5, got it, I got it, fine. So basically on our, on the old thing, we're talking about 1.5, so this would be 4.85, correct?
No, those are NAVD numbers.
Yeah, no, but
All the finished floors, everything on that table is consistent, the consistent datum, regardless. So
All based on AVD.
they're either below that number or above that number, and what the basis of that number is irrelevant. But just to a point though, the FEMA base flood elevations that you're talking about from the maps, those are NGVD numbers. So the corresponding number would be that number minus 1.5 feet.
Guys, what are we doing here other than discussing?
I still use the old, in my
Oh,
mind,
and-
it's still going back to the 1929 numbers.
All right, but what the fundamental issue here
We're
is,
talking about 10 feet above sea level, we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. I got it. But what the fundamental thing is here is we're going to affect 14 homes out of the total of
It's all
1,500.
one, it's 2 homes, right?
But the net is 14.
Yeah, but right now.
Zone 1,
zone
yeah, zone 1, but then
You got 2 houses,
There's 2 houses that are going to be affected.
okay.
So that basically means these 2
assuming we
houses
design a
theoretically-
system to, right.
That means these 2 houses, just to confirm, would effectively potentially have the opportunity to flood.
In a 5 years, every 10 years in a
5-year
5-year
storm.
storm, correct.
No, but I
Which
think
happens.
that the way that you mitigate against that is what the administration said with their harmonization, and they have a plan, I believe, to tie into our stormwater system.
And that's
Right.
what I was getting at. So how do we protect these 2 homes?
Right.
Is through
And,
the.
and I think that's part of the policy
localized
legislation
design,
that the administration has presented a couple times and wants to bring an ultimate policy before the council.
Right, so we effectively have a dike in front of these guys' house through the driveway.
Well, or they
Whatever
tie,
works.
or they
Whatever
temporary,
works.
I think one of the option is to,
We-
temporary
We
tap
understand.
into our system.
Yeah,
until they
I
elevate.
understand. But what we're really discussing is the 2 houses in zone 1 would be affected.
So if we want to give them a directive to
Well,
design.
let me correct that just a second though, please. So if we say the minimum crown of road is 3.35 and we're designing a system that takes right away plus 25 feet, right away plus 50 feet. But then in reality, we get 100% of the water, then it might be crown of road plus 6 inches. So that number might be 3.85 or, so there may be more than 2 is all I'm saying.
So his concern is that.
Depending on what our
company's
ultimate level of
inability to
service
capture
is.
their own water. And that's because I think that's why Tom, I think what you're concerned is the property's inability to capture their own water. Is that correct?
Right. In reality today, if it rains 7 inches, we're going to get most of that water into the right of way.
Okay, right.
And it's going to cause flooding whether or not it should or shouldn't, but it will. But again, keeping in mind that with the pump system and a guaranteed 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch of removal rate and a 7-inch rainfall event, and so less than 7 hours, it should be gone.
Got it. All right, so we've been through a lot today, right? Get the absorption factor for me is starting to wear off. Yeah. So I think it would be appropriate now, if anybody in the community has a question that they want to ask, you guys could come to the podium one at a time. Just let John go first, Lucio, if you don't mind. And
So I just heard something that I guess I totally disagree with, that if you contain 100% of the water on your property, it's going to go into
Can you say
the
your name and address?
John Festa, 695 Harbor Lane. That was made that if you have 100% containment on your property, that water is eventually going to go into the roadway. That doesn't make sense. I thought I heard Tom say that sea level rise was not a significant consideration in the design, that it was the rainfall calculation that you were designing for, et cetera. Could you please confirm that's what you said?
We are considering the sea level rise in the design, but
Right.
its direct implication is to groundwater infiltration. Because we're using a pump, we can overcome the increase in sea level rise. The variability of that, whether it's a foot or 2 feet, is not going to radically impact the pumping rate. what it would do
Okay.
is, would be affect how much water goes into the ground.
Sure. And if we didn't have sea level rise, what portion of what you're designing now, what is the approximate cost of what you're designing now for sea level rise if we didn't have it? And the reason I asked that question is I mentioned last night that the council should consider what is the impact that homeowners have on from rainfall on the system, and then what is the impact that sea level rise has on the additional cost of the system. I think the council should have those numbers for how you proportion, not a tax, a fee and assessment to homeowners. That's very important. And I don't think that there's a projection of what the rainfall rate will be in 2040 or 2050. You're using current rainfall rates. You're going to decide on a 5-year storm versus a 10-year storm. Not that the fact that in 40 years we may have a higher frequency of 5-year storm, whatever. Okay, you get me.
The 5-year
So-
storm is no longer the 5-year storm. Correct. I understand.
Exactly. So just sitting and absorbing this for the first time, in addition to whatever research I did a week ago, it's a complicated problem. It's a confusing problem based upon what you're looking at. And the only reason I think you should hurry to make a decision would be in case you do get funding, the price comes down, and you want to do this plan that, at least for zone 1, satisfies its immediate problem and its potential future problem in 2040. But I don't think you should hurry. I think you should be realistic about the cost. When you started this project, if you assumed it was a $35 million project, you had some capacity to pay for that through a bond issue and other sources, okay? So if I were up there, I wouldn't start a project if I knew the cost was going to be 65 million or 100 or whatever the cost overrun, bring it to 100 million. Well, nobody knows. Would not have started down this road, but you started down the road based upon a much smaller projection of cost, 35 million. You're at 65 million, it's going to go higher. No guarantee you're going to get the funds to do it completely or absorb it. And then if you don't get the funds, who's going to pay for it? All the homeowners. It's not going to be done by ad valorem taxes. I mean, from your recent rate study, which I totally disagree with, how it was done. There's no benefit. Homeowners are being charged based upon their impervious area, not taking into consideration how much they absorb on their property. And if you fill your property, and my property was filled 2 feet with sand, but it has a retaining wall around it, the only roof portion of my home that puts into the street is by the driveway. Everything else is contained. That wasn't done. I believe in the modeling world, at least what I read, there's this effective impervious fraction that is considered in models. And we didn't consider that fraction of the benefit of the impact that an individual home is putting on the system. All we assumed was each home of a certain impervious footprint is going to pay this amount. We didn't consider if I have a 75 by 100 lot and I have a certain area of imperviousness, 4,500 square feet, and my neighbor has a 100 by 100 lot and has the same impervious area, he or she should get a benefit in terms of the reduced cost because less impact. So there's a lot of issues that you have to tackle, but I would just offer that you should look at and breaking this down into the immediate problem and the long-term problem and the impact of the cost of the long-term problem if you go right now. That's very important. So if you're going to not put your pen down and spend whatever is remaining in the reserve, you should realize that it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to that number one, you might not want to build that project now. You might want to phase that in over the time frame. But a lot of these assumptions need to be reevaluated. And that's what I offer now. And I'm going to do a lot of research on this, so I'll be back. But thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Luis De La Cruz, 640 Allendale Road. So you all know exactly how I feel about this, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I am going to address one particular issue that you all had a discussion here, and that was, what's the hurry? You know, the fact that we missed out on the SFR or SRF funds this year, we can reapply next year or the year after that. Or the year after that. As a matter of fact, every day that goes by, every month that goes by, every year that goes by is an additional day, month, year that we have to the useful life of whatever it is that you guys decide to build. So, you know, we have to be on our own calendar, not on somebody else's calendar. We need to be on the Village of Key Biscayne's calendar. And I don't think the Village of Key Biscayne's calendar is so hurried that we have to do anything today or tomorrow or the next day. We are not flooding. We are not drowning. I live in the middle of Zone 1, and I have 2 houses within Zone 1. So if anybody's concerned about what's going on with resiliency in Zone 1, it's me. Trust me, okay? And I know exactly what happens when it rains here. And I can tell you that within the last 2 years, the flooding in my area has been a lot less. Why? Because we've finally gotten to the point where we're maintaining what we have. And we did not maintain that for more than 20 years. And we didn't start maintaining it until I stood up here 15 times asking you guys to maintain it. Now we're doing a much better job. Chris is handling it a little bit better, I think. But the bottom line is that it is unreasonable, illogical, financially irresponsible for us to go forward with a project like this without doing due diligence, which is, let's fix what we have. Let's find out where our weaknesses are. Let's add shallow injection wells in those areas, and we can plan for the future. Because I know that I'm not going to be around, but somebody who owns my 2 houses is going to one day have to tear them down and build them back up. And I know our problem is not storm drainage. We're totally, you know, misguided here. Our problem is sea level rise. And none of us know exactly what's going to happen there, but we have graphs and different things. We will for sure have to, whether we like it or not, when the water starts coming up my floor, it will have to, my house will have to be torn down, or hopefully a lot before then. So please, I mean, what's the hurry? Whose calendar are we on? We should be on our calendar, Village of Key Biscayne's. That's what I think we
At least
should
that's
do.
the purpose of what we're doing.
I'm sorry, sir.
That's the purpose of what Joe asked us to do with this group. I mean, so we hear you. I mean, loud and clear.
Okay.
And I'm not by any means being disrespectful. We've heard, you know.
No, I don't think you're being disrespectful. I just see that we keep missing the forest from the trees here, in all sincerity. You know, and I know exactly how my lot floods. And this, I mean, with all due respect to the engineers here that say that all that water goes into the right of way, that's not true. Okay. I know that the water in my lot stays because my lot stays flooded after the street is no longer full of water. So all that water is in my lot. It's not going out into the right of way. That's a fallacious argument. I'm sorry. I've got to say it, you know, because, you know, one thing is to, you know, jot numbers down and stuff like that. And the other thing is to actually see what's going on every time it rains. And you know well, because I've been discussing this with you for many years, and so do you, Ed. So, you know, if there's.
You also have a wall around your house. That's what
I don't. No, I don't have a wall.
Come on, Luis, your house, you're basically the terrace in front of your house. You have the whole wall around, which keeps all the water in your
No, I have a wooden fence around my house. Well, I have a wall on one side,
Yeah.
on one, that
Yeah,
my neighbor built.
We don't need to be specific on your
And
own.
that's the way it should be, by the way. We should all, it should be required to have a retaining wall.
It is.
It is. The new
And I
houses
think it
are
is
all-
now, but it wasn't when my house was built in the 50s. Okay, so anyway, please, let's not miss the forest from the trees. Let's
Okay.
make sure we're on our schedule.
I hear you.
Interest rates are as high as they've been in so many years. So if we're going to set out to do something that we're going to borrow money in order to do, we're better off waiting several years. And I think Ed London knows more about that than anybody here. So,
I don't,
you know,
unfortunately, my crystal ball has not been working lately, so I won't project.
okay,
All right.
so thank you.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Anybody else feel the need?
Good morning, George Castañeda, 485 Hampton Lane, Zone 1. Like him, I would benefit from Zone 1 drainage problem. I'm also in the industry. We have a construction company to install water, sewer, and drainage. So it's good for my industry, but I'm opposed to this extravaganza project that doesn't need it. I think, I don't want to talk in engineers because I'm not an engineer term, but I want to try to use debate. The drainage problem here, and in the last meeting, somebody came, 525 Hampton Lane, and his house flooded. I'm at 45 Hampton Lane, one house between them. My house is not elevated like his. My house never flooded. It never flooded in Andrew. It never flooded in that. So the problem with these systems is also that it's closed, number one, and it's not open. I can talk to you about it later, but now I'm going to consider this. We cannot paint this system, which is very expensive, outrageously expensive, the same paint that different people have. 525 have a headache. I don't have headaches. He might have a migraine and he needs medicine. He might need surgery if you look at it, but I don't need it. And the project spend, whether it's you don't have a headache, it's going to give you heart surgery. So be sure we have a great system. The system was designed in 1950 by an engineer. And the engineer probably died waiting for Key Biscayne to call back because we went back in 1990 to get an upgrade that works for another 35 years. We're sitting here 35 years. And that system, you didn't do maintenance and you didn't do any upgrade. One upgrade in 75 years. One upgrade. Also, it will help you, use another term, to find out, and they told him about the water that we need to move. How much are we spending in flooding every year for the last 10 years? Cities are spending a lot of money. They have to rent pumps. They have to bring people out. How much we spend? It's simple. It's kind of like a roof. We have a building. It's kind of also the same flooding. And we were working in the association, and there was a roof leak. And we were spending money, and we were spending $5,000, $6,000 a month or something, like $50,000 a year. Eventually, we say, we get a loan, and we put a new roof, we're going to spend $2,000. So if we don't know how much we're spending in flooding today, how much water we need to pump out, we don't need it. The water leave. We're talking about 40-something hours, 24 hours. There's two basic things. The system, the drainage system, move the water from the surface. That's the purpose of the system. The other factor is the time. As far as I know, and I drive around, I'm on truck, I have also properties in another zone, the water disappears. So the system is working. The problem is the time. So it's the time. We need to work on the time. And you work with that in the system, in the process system, and in the storage. We just need to add storage and more process time evacuation that we have. That's what the problem with the system today. We have not upgraded to the conditions that change. And the elevation of the houses is a contributing factor. Why the house 525 flood and mine not? We are both not elevated because all the water goes to him, and he have a drainage in front of his house. So the system cannot absorb that. So wherever the water goes to his house because the house around him are elevated. So the water doesn't have to go. So I volunteer to other people in the building. I've been dealing with the public work since 7 years when I was doing a construction here. I offer to put drainage in front of that property at my cost. Came through 1 year, went through the other year. They were not here. Those people are no longer here. But I'm just telling you, there was an opportunity when I did the house. Right now, we have opportunities to do that when people are building. We also have a new project coming in. I suggest that you have a budget and you split it by zone. I love you're in zone 1, I'm in zone 1, but I think zone 2, 3, 4, 5 are waiting for zone 1. And we get the headaches, we get the migraines in each zone, and we can fix it. This way, we keep waiting for zone 1, design back and forth, and we're not doing anything on the street. Several years ago, somebody came to my house, and during the elections, she was asking to the extension of the bond. And I said, well, we have 30 million or something like that. We need 100. I said, what do you do with the 30? Nothing. So why you want 100? You haven't shown, you have not built anything when we started here or in 30 years. And you expect this system to somehow magically work, so thank you very much. Have a nice day. And anything that you need, you let me know.
Thank you. Nancy?
Before we adjourn, would you just recap the tasks that you've set out for yourselves regarding the parameters?
I could try, Nancy. Okay.
I just want to make sure we're all.
Yeah, I think right now I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Julio Diaz, 201 Crandon Boulevard. I don't live in the residential area, so I don't have the problems. My view is that flooding, so we're talking about storm water, it seems to be localized. Not everyone that has a house in the residential area suffers from the flooding. So my question is, do we need a system that is so encompassing, or we need a system that is more geared to where the problem is happening and try to take care of that particular problem without having to cover all the areas that are not quite affected by the flooding? I wrote you, I think I have some ideas, but anyway, that's the,
Thank you. Anybody else?
Anybody else? Okay, so enclosure?
No.
Yeah,
It's on Nancy after.
okay.
What the
Pardon me?
parameters are. Motion adjourned.
No, I think Nancy, you were looking for some level of summary, right?
I thought you
Yeah.
wrote it out for her. You want us to write out what we're talking about?
Pardon me?
Do you want us to put it in
Okay.
writing? Give you in writing what were the parameters?
I just
We're
wonder
talking about.
whether you do it verbally and we take notes.
I think,
or
I think,
Or whether you.
How do you like it?
so Nancy, Steve just said he's made a summary, so Steve, you
Well, I've
want?
got notes. I want to confirm it with you all. So-
Okay, why don't you do that, Steve?
So obviously take these parameters and ask, whether it's AECom or another firm to do an assessment, time horizon at 2050. Is that what I understand?
Yep.
The curve is intermediate, no intermediate.
Oh, I thought we were gonna get a price from AECom.
We're gonna get,
don't particularly want to use AECom because things are biased, okay?
we're gonna get
All right,
prices for
I'm just putting down
Yeah.
right now,
just the task, yeah.
5-year storm. Contributing area, because we're trying to get the baseline. I understand.
Yep.
25 feet contributing area.
Excuse me, Mr. Manager, can you turn your mic on?
It's on.
Is it on?
It's on, yes. We have not talked about what we want as the crown of road. That may be a byproduct of those, but where's Robert? Is that a byproduct, or can we set a standard of crown of road?
We can use what's there now, and then we can also set based upon our observed flow.
What would be the best baseline? Because I think what
You come to
Councilmember
the
Bracken-
mic in the front, sorry.
Councilmember Bracken is trying to get to a baseline that shows us the base at which we can
So it
go.
would be preferred to set a baseline, so that way we can deal with harmonization issues. But as a worst case scenario, we can also, it doesn't take any additional time, but show you what there is today. So we have, in modeling terms, there's a warning stage and alert stage. we'll set the current conditions for the warning and then the alert for whatever the adopted or recommended level of service is. So you could see a comparison.
That's fine.
Okay, so which one?
Base.
We'll do the existing and then also show a proposed one that will help with harmonization.
Well, if I may, we have to design Crown of Road to whatever area you define as contributing area. We have to design a system that for the 5-year storm does not flood the Crown of Road. So that would be one criteria to set the Crown of Road. The other would be that based on the NOAA intermediate curve, if I understand it, and then we have to go 1 foot above that to get to the bottom of the road base, and then we go from there. So there are 2 criteria that potentially come into play.
So yes, I think that's a result of some of the other criteria. And
So
then
Steve,
lastly,
just make
the
ba-
assumption that it's BFE +2, or do you want to do BFE +3?
BFE +3. I think what we're trying to do is get to what would be the minimal requirement by state ordinance, okay? To the best possible. Joe, that's what you're looking for, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right,
I think those are the numbers. I'll bounce it off of AECon, make sure we got it right. I'll make sure I share it with you by the end of
and
today.
the other thing we want to do is we want to go out with 2 additional engineers. But before you do any of this, is what we want we want pricing for AECom so that we can know if they're going to charge us additional fees or not. Okay. Anything else, Mr. London?
Nope.
And then 2 additional engineers.
2 additional engineers. Ed's going to talk to you.
Do the same calculations.
Yeah. No, Ed's going to talk to you specifically about those issues. Go ahead.
One to review the EAC plan and one for the percentages of rain occurrences from 3 inches to 6.5 inches, the probabilities that for those rains to occur.
Explain that again.
Probability, like right now, the probability of a 7-inch rain, we said is somewhere between 65% of one, less than, say, 2 times in 10 years. How much is a 6.5, a 6, on and on down? So we'll know what the probabilities are that we're talking about discharging water from. Once we know that, then we also know the absorption, that we can come out with amount of water to be discharged minus what we have today.
So
and what is
that
necessary.
triangle above the orange
I
line.
know, I understand.
Okay, I mean, I just want to make sure I'm.
Is that what it comes out to?
I want to make sure I'm, yeah, that's.
Well,
That's what it actually is.
okay.
So I just do want to say that we have that information, but if you want to pay someone else to do it, we can.
Let me see what you have first.
Yeah.
Okay. The ECOM has that information.
From 3 inch by ½ inch up to 6.5 inches.
They did a complete
Because we know
gap analysis
with
for
the
EEC plan.
probabilities.
And then they can.
I want like, if this is 1 in 10 years.
No,
This
I
is
know
5
what you're
times,
saying.
et cetera.
Councilmember, I
So we
understand.
then know what we're looking at, and we're going to tell people we're going to take care of this thing 95% of the time. This is what it's going to cost versus 99% of the time. This is what it's going to cost.
And then Steve, the other critical thing we want to talk about, and maybe is a spot fix for the current flooding around the school. Okay, so what's it going to cost in rough numbers to design a fix for the actual flooding at the school, a spot fix, whether it's an injection well?
You got a point that, which brings up the point. Talking to Jose Lopez, he said that actually, again, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. We put in 2 wells, I think, or we put in 2 wells. They were going to make them shallow injection wells, but the cost was such, they said stop. They didn't want to spend the money to do it at that time, I think. I don't know when that was, probably 10 years ago. So we might want to investigate that, because obviously that was what they assumed what the fix was necessary. Still, to re-examine that, to see if that still makes any sense to go forward with that, to take care of the flooding in the school area.
You know, I think we have an obligation to address in a quick format the flooding around the actual school itself. Okay, so the kids are not, people aren't driving golf carts in the water. Kids aren't having to walk through the water. Okay, so
and the low point
whether
on
it
that-
happens once a month.
Low point on 300 Hereford Drive also.
Yeah.
I think.
So I understand. So I understand the first 2.
And if we have to
The first 2 are going to inform the third.
Correct.
So, because we have to make a decision on what level of service we want them to come up with a solution for around the school.
Okay, but
Well, first of all, why don't we say this? If you have two injection wells, shallow wells, what will that do for the level of service around the school? In other words, we have two gravity wells, assuming they were supposed to be injection wells. Maybe you can find the plan somewhere, which they laid out before, because I'm sure maybe they can figure level of
Okay,
service.
so if you want us to evaluate that plan, if we can find it, we'll do that. But I mean, we'd have to size the plan based on what the level of service we'd want.
Well,
Excuse me, size the pumps.
Look, all I'm saying for this, I thought the pump was limited to the amount of head you could have there for a 24-inch diameter well. Couldn't be more than 8 feet. Is that right?
But head is calculated based on all those criteria we just talked about.
But Steve,
So,
Steve,
yes.
I think what we're getting at is that we know we have a flooding problem there now. Okay, we think we have an obligation to address that
See what we
as
have.
fast as possible. What do we need to do to get that to be so that the kids, so that there's a reasonable amount of non-flooding in front of us?
Right. But
We can
instead of
do that.
reinventing the wheel again.
I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
So if they have a plan already, like take a look at that first.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll
And
look at
then-
that. We'll look at that plan.
What will
It's
that
on-
cost to do?
It's on the shelf. Can we pull it?
Yeah.
We'll look to see if we can find that plan.
Joe, any feedback? Okay. All right, we're good. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Thanks for coming. We're adjourned.
No discussion.